Hello and welcome back everybody to the second video in my mug series. I'm going to give a little bit of recap to the last video. If you already remember all that or you're just scrolling through all the videos, feel free to fast forward to the number that I write somewhere on the screen. But a little bit of kind of throwback to the last video, making sure we got a nice dry bat, sticking it on, flattening it out. Everything's nice and wet. Doing our coning slash hopefully also centering at the same time by applying that a little bit to 11 o'clock. Everything's braced, nice and contained. Pushing in. So a nice little cone. We're gonna do a couple cones. I'm left-handed, so I'm gonna be applying the force going back down with my left hand, but if you're right-handed, feel free, do it that way. We'll do one more. Now, to get everything ready to open up, first I'm going to make sure everything's nice and clean, nice and happy. So the first thing we want to do is to take this piece of clay from its normal shape down a little bit further so it looks closer to a hockey puck where it's a little bit thinner. So I'm going to be pushing that down, trying to keep everything nice and stable and centered. That's the hardest part for a lot of people when they first get going, is how to open it up and how to bring it down without messing up its stability. And so you can tell I'm still keeping that hand here, applying that pressure, supporting, as this is now pushing down. It moved to this knuckle from this knuckle because I can no longer reach that. Anything that's stable that can push down, a lot of people do their little knife hand pushing down. That works too, it just feels pretty weird right there, versus I'd much rather just have my thumb. So, got this nice stable piece of clay. Now, we're gonna put a hole in the middle. People do this, will do this a variety of ways, whether it's using one hand or both. A lot of times I'll see people think they totally got it, and they'll just take one hand and just be like, I totally got it. This is gonna be the perfect circle I've ever seen in my whole life. And then they're like, wow, that's actually pretty tough to make a nice hole in the center. So what I'm going to do is let's try that again. So when you're first starting out, the way that I would suggest doing it is what's called, and this will be the first time that I use this term, but I will use it a lot. It's called hugging the clay. It's another word for just kind of supporting it. So both my hands are just hugging it. They're not trying to fight anything. They're not trying to work it into anywhere. They're just being a nice little supportive friend. So hugging here, trying to keep my hands nice and even, not trying to wonk to one side or another. My thumbs are going to touch together. They don't have to overlap. They can just touch. Going to meet at the middle. And they're just going to go straight down. They're going to go down a little bit. Then they're going to realize that they're going to start to hit a little bit of friction. We'll add a little bit of a puddle. And what you'll also see is this will start to come up into a sharp little arch. And so if I don't do anything about that, you can see it really starts to arch open. I don't like the archway because eventually that'll start to rip or curl over or become a nuisance later. And so I will push that down. Come back to it, thumbs down. Now wait, Sean, do I go all the way to the bottom? Do I stop? How far do I stop? How can I tell? I can't see anything. So, very important question. This is now when you first start to decide, how thick do you want this base to be? What we're going to use as an example is this cup that I was drinking water out of. So, you can see that this has a pretty thick base, but when you first put the hole down and goes all the way to the bottom, you are the first one to judge how thick you want that to be, how much you want to trim out later to give yourself a nice pretty foot. That's entirely up to you. What I would suggest at the very least is to leave 1/4 to 1/3 of an inch or about 1 centimeter. So how do I tell what that is? It's hard for me to judge. The first thing that I would do is that I'm going to take this hole, myself, hug hands in there. I'm just going to open my thumbs up a little bit, give myself a little bit of space. Stick my sponge down there, get rid of any water so I can clearly see that base. And this is going to be the first time I use my lovely Dovey needle tool. Well, this needle tool is going to stick down into it. My finger is going to be on the top so I can judge how deep it went. So if I aim for the middle, stick it all the way till it touches the bat, put my finger in the way, that tells me how thick the bottom is. So I can go probably a little bit further till it gets to there. Set that spinning a little bit. I can go a little bit further. It's always better to lean on the thicker base side than the thinner, because you can always trim away more on the bottom than if you leave it too thin and you try to take it off and you just rip a big hole in the middle. It's not going to be a very useful mug. So lean on the side of it a little bit thicker. This, I would judge, is at about that thick, which is totally fine. Because also when we start to open, a lot of people tend to dig a little bit deeper. And as we start to compress this base down, you'll see that it'll also get thinner and thinner and thinner. So I've judged that I like this depth. And now we're going to move from our hug hands to, you're going to pick your dominant hand again, whether it's right hand or left hand. So I'll show you a little bit with the right hand, a little bit with the left hand, showing you my different hand placements. If I'm going to do it with my right hand, my left hand is hugging, he's supporting, not moving. Right hand, these two fingers are bracing. It's a lot stronger than this finger by itself. These want to support themselves, but the middle finger is longer, so that's the one doing most of the work. I'll actually add a little bit less water so you can see what I'm doing. Right hand, touching the bottom, and then we're going to try to move straight out. So, touching the bottom, trying to move straight out, trying to move straight back towards me. So that was a little bit of the ways. You can see actually on the inside, the top is a little bit higher than everything else. So what I like to call in the inside as people are moving it out, ideally it's going to be perfectly flat, but most people are going to either lean towards mountain or a valley, where they're either going to start out high and slowly push down, or they're going to start low and slowly lighten up as they reach a valley. I prefer a mountain if I'm going to lean anyway, and the reason why is that I can always take my sponge, put it in the middle, push down, and I can make it into a flat. So now that was with my right hand. This is what it looks like with my left hand. Where my left hand, push it in, trying to come out nice and wide. And you can see it stayed centered for many reasons. One, because I went really slowly. Everybody tries to pull it really quickly and then it gets all over the place. We want this to be as centered and stable as possible because it can only go downhill from here. So if we start off with it wonky, your pot's going to be wonky. Now, once I pulled it out to the width I want, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to take my sponge and I'm going to compress. And the reason why is that, especially this bottom of our mug is going to be the thing most likely to crack. Most likely you're going to get what's called an S-crack, where it's going to crack from here through the middle and across. And that's because all the water slowly gets soaked into the bottom, and the bottom is drying at a different rate than the top is because it's been soaked with water a lot more. So what compression does is, one, it forces all the little clay particles to push closer and closer together, which makes it a lot stronger. And two, it tries to drive out any little air bubbles, pieces of water, imperfections, ugliness. And leaves us with this nice flat bottom. Now if you want to be really fancy with it, we can take our wooden rib, and this wooden rib is the most generic shape, and it's got a nice little 90-degree right here. Mine's a little bit less because I've worn it down, but we're going to take this, we're going to push it in, and we're going to make it nice and flat. Now, an important thing with this tool is that if I had my tool straight up, then the clay is going to hit it just like a wall. But in the same way that we talk about, if the clay is going this way, my fingertips are coming out nice and slowly. If I have this tool, and if I was going to use it on the side, I put it at an angle. The farther the angle, the more smoothly it's going to work. The more I get to perpendicular, the more it's going to try to scrape things up. And if I start to go past perpendicular, then it's going to really kind of shovel everything in, and it's going to be havoc. So always lean towards the side that it's going smoothly, which means even with the top, it's going smoothly underneath. If I'm perpendicular, it's going to hit it like a wall. If I'm going like that, it's going to just shovel huge amounts of clay out. That's not what we want. So if I'm here, I'm going to work from the center towards that 3 o'clock because I'm working at the right side because it's going that way. I'm going to put my tool in and move it over. And look how pretty that bottom is becoming. I'm doing two things. I'm both compressing it a lot more, and making it stronger, and I'm making it nice and flat. It's nice and pretty. Now, for this mug, how do you decide how big you want this hole to be? That's all based off of how wide you want your mug to be, because this is the inside. So I have to make it the inside plus whatever width this is to the outside. And so I'll make the hole big enough that I can stick my hand in it, because I'm going to need that later when I'm pulling up the walls. If it's too small, it's going to be really tough to get my hand in there. So I like to make it at least 4 fingers thick. Sometimes a little bit wider. It's also a nice rule to make it so that your sponge can at the very least sit comfortably in it. So now I'm right there, all nice and happy. I clean everything up. You can see all the clay is nice and contained, everything's smooth, everything's happy, everything's ready for that next step, which we're going to get to in the next video. So, hope you enjoyed. Please subscribe, like the video, hit the bell icon, all those lovely things. I like making these videos. I like teaching people, learning. If you have any questions, please put things in the comments. I'm going to try to answer them as much as possible. And I'll see you in future videos. Thank you.